Before we dive into tonight's tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want more creepy stories that will keep you up at night. So, let me tell you about the worst job I ever had. It was at this rundown fast food joint called Burger Haven, smack in the middle of nowhere off some deserted highway in rural Ohio. The place looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint since the 80s. The sign out front flickered like it was on its last legs, and the parking lot was just a graveyard of cracked asphalt and weeds. I mean, it was the kind of place you'd drive past and think, who actually eats there? Well, turns out not many people did. But I wasn't there by choice. I dropped out of college after losing my scholarship, and let's just say my options were limited. Burger Haven was hiring, and the night shift was the only slot open. Desperation makes you do things you'd never normally consider, you know? So there I was, walking into this place on my first night, feeling like I'd already hit rock bottom. The manager, Mr. Hargrove, was waiting for me when I got there. He was this gaunt, wiry guy in his late 50s, with this permanent scowl etched into his face. His hands were all scarred up, like he'd been burned a dozen times over, and his eyes, man, his eyes were just hollow, like he hadn't slept in years. He didn't even bother with a proper greeting, just shoved this crumpled piece of paper at me and said, "Follow these or you won't make it till morning." I unfolded the paper, and it was this grease-stained handwritten list titled Rules for the Night Shift. The writing was all shaky, like someone had scribbled it in a hurry, and it smelled weird, like burnt meat, but worse, like something had been charred beyond recognition. I glanced up at Hargrove, and he was just staring at me, dead serious. No smile, no joke, nothing. Just this cold, unblinking stare that made my stomach twist. "What happens if I don't follow them?" I asked, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't already regretting every life choice that had led me to this moment. He didn't answer right away, just leaned in closer, and I swear the temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. "You don't want to find out," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Just do what the rules say, and don't ask questions." I nodded, because what else could I do? But as I looked down at that list, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong with this place. I mean, who needs a set of rules just to work a night shift at a burger joint? But hey, I needed the money, so I figured I'd play along. How bad could it be, right? Oh, how wrong I was. So let me break down these rules for you. Rule 1. Never look directly at the security camera footage. If you see movement, turn off the monitor immediately. Rule 2. If the fryer starts bubbling violently at 1:33 a.m., unplug it and walk away. Do not look inside. Rule 3. The drive-through intercom will sometimes pick up static. If you hear a voice whispering your name, close the window and ignore it. Rule 4. The supply closet is off limits after midnight. If you hear knocking, do not open it under any circumstances. Rule 5. If a customer orders the midnight special, tell them it's unavailable. If they insist, lock yourself in the freezer until sunrise. Rule 6. At 3 a.m., the lights will flicker. Stand perfectly still until they stop. Do not look at the shadows. Yeah, I know. Sounds like something out of a bad horror movie, right? But Hargrove wasn't joking. He made me read them out loud to him, like some kind of twisted initiation. And when I got to the last one, he just nodded and said, "Good. Now don't forget them. Your life depends on it." That got my attention. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded again, clutching that stupid piece of paper like it was a lifeline. And then he left, just like that, without another word. I stood there for a minute, staring at the rules, trying to make sense of it all. But the more I read them, the more uneasy I felt. There was something about the way they were written, like whoever wrote them was scared out of their mind. The first half of my shift is uneventful. Just the usual mind-numbing routine of flipping burgers, dropping frozen fries into bubbling oil, and wiping down the same sticky counter over and over again. The restaurant is empty, which doesn't surprise me. We barely get customers during the day, let alone in the dead of night. The only sound is the hum of the refrigerators, the occasional crackle of the drive-through intercom, and the faint buzz of the flickering neon sign outside. At some point, I check my phone. 1:32 a.m. I rub my eyes, stifling a yawn. The rules are still crammed in my pocket, the greasy paper slightly damp with sweat. I haven't had to follow any of them yet, which is good because I still don't know if I'm actually supposed to take them seriously. Then, right on cue, the fryer starts going insane. The bubbling oil suddenly surges, frothing over the sides like a boiling pot left unattended. The overhead vents rattle. The smell of hot grease thickens, turning acrid, almost metallic. My stomach twists. Rule 2, if the fryer starts bubbling violently at 1:33 a.m., unplug it and walk away. Do not look inside. I swallow hard. My first instinct is to turn down the heat, maybe check if something's caught in the oil, but the rule lingers in my head, warning me like a whisper in the back of my mind. I force myself to move. The plug is tucked behind the fryer, and I fumble with it for a second before yanking it from the socket. The machine lets out a sharp hiss, and just like that, the bubbling stops. Silence. The fryer sits still, oil shimmering under the fluorescent lights. Then from deep inside the fryer, I hear it. A giggle. Soft, light, playful. My breath catches in my throat. I take a step back, hands slick with sweat. There's nothing funny about this. The sound is faint, muffled by the cooling oil, but it's unmistakably a child's laugh, like something you'd hear on a playground. It lasts for only a second before fading into the hum of the kitchen. I don't move. I don't breathe. The longer I stand there, the more I feel something pressing against me, a feeling like I'm being watched. The fryer sits motionless, but my skin crawls like something is just beneath the surface, waiting. I don't check inside. I don't risk it. Instead, I turn on my heel and walk away, heart hammering against my ribs. I distract myself with busy work, wiping down the counter again, straightening the napkin dispensers, anything to make it feel normal again. But even as the night drags on, I can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone. I almost convince myself it was nothing. Almost. It's just past 5 when Mr. Hargrove returns to relieve me. He doesn't ask how my shift went, doesn't even acknowledge me as he heads straight to the back office. Fine by me. I grab my backpack from under the counter and stretch, ready to go home and sleep this place out of my system. But then I remember the fryer. I hesitate, just for a second. Then, against my better judgment, I step toward it. The oil is still, no bubbling, no sound. And then I see it, floating in the fryer, half submerged in the darkened oil, is a toy. A small plastic doll, its limbs warped and melted, its face barely recognizable under the thick layer of grease. But the eyes are untouched. 2 glassy blue eyes staring straight up at me. I exhale sharply, a shiver crawling down my spine. It wasn't there before. I know it wasn't. My stomach knots as I grab the nearest pair of tongs and fish it out. The oil drips from its disfigured body, trailing across the floor as I carry it toward the trash. My fingers shake as I drop it into the bin and slam the lid shut. I step back, wiping my hands on my jeans. It's done. It's gone. But when I turn back toward the counter, my heart stops. The doll is sitting there, perfectly intact. No melted limbs, no oil stains, just sitting, waiting, watching. I show up for my shift feeling worse than the night before. I barely slept after finding that doll. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing it sitting on the counter, its melted features frozen in that eerie, watching stare. I'd thrown it out. Again. This time, I took it all the way to the dumpster out back, chucked it in, and slammed the lid shut like that would do anything. I even stayed outside for a few extra seconds, staring at the darkened parking lot, breathing in the cold air just to shake the unease from my bones. Now, standing behind the counter, I keep stealing glances toward the kitchen, toward the fryer. The same fryer that bubbled violently at exactly 1:33 a.m. last night. The same fryer that left me with that goddamn doll. But everything's quiet, for now. I try to focus on cleaning, keeping my hands busy, wiping down counters, scrubbing the soda station, restocking cups, anything to keep my mind from wandering. The hours drag. The place stays empty. I check my phone. 1:59 a.m. I let out a slow breath, rubbing a hand over my face. Just another hour or so. Then, crash. It's so loud I flinch, the rag slipping from my hand. The noise erupts from the dining area like someone flipped a whole damn table. My stomach knots. I hesitate, straining to hear past the dull hum of the kitchen appliances. Nothing. No voices. No footsteps. I slowly step out from behind the counter, my pulse pounding in my ears as I round the corner. Then I stop dead in my tracks. Every single chair in the restaurant is stacked into a perfect pyramid. It stretches all the way to the ceiling, balanced so precisely it looks impossible. And sitting on top, perfectly centered, is a burger. A cold, slightly shriveled burger. I swallow hard, taking a step closer. Something about it feels wrong. Then I see the bite marks. Someone or something has already eaten part of it. I shiver. The restaurant is locked, no customers, no employees but me. The realization sends a cold, sinking feeling through my stomach. Then, drip, drip. A single drop of something dark hits the floor. I don't want to look. I don't want to see. But my eyes are already dragging back to the burger, my breath catching in my throat as another drop falls. Then another. Thick, red, wrong. The burger is bleeding. It seeps from the bite mark, dark red liquid trailing down the bun, pooling onto the wax paper. The air smells faintly metallic. My stomach churns. Then, the entire pyramid shifts. The chairs groan, wood scraping against wood. I don't wait. I run. I don't look back as I dive behind the counter, heart hammering in my chest. I half expect the chairs to collapse, for something to chase me, but nothing happens. The restaurant is silent again, like it never happened. I don't go back to check. I don't clean it up. I just grip the edge of the counter, force myself to breathe, and count down the minutes until morning. The minutes drag by, slow and suffocating, until finally the clock blinks 2:45 a.m. Almost there. Just another hour. I exhale shakily and rub my hands over my face. The restaurant is silent again, save for the soft hum of the overhead lights and the distant buzz of the freezer. The air smells stale, like old grease and something faintly metallic, though I don't know if that's from the burger or my imagination. I push away from the counter, forcing my legs to move. If I sit here like a scared idiot all night, I'm never going to make it. I start wiping down the counter, trying to focus on the familiar, mundane motions. Then, knock, knock, knock. The rag in my hand stills. I lift my head, pulse already quickening. The sound is coming from the back of the kitchen, the supply closet. My mouth goes dry. I know what the rules say. Rule 4. The supply closet is off limits after midnight. If you hear knocking, do not open it under any circumstances. The knocking comes again. 3 sharp raps, slow, deliberate. I clench my jaw and turn back to the counter, gripping the rag like it'll do something. Ignore it. I scrub at an invisible stain, my movements stiff, robotic. Knock, knock, knock. It's louder this time. I swallow hard, eyes flicking toward the clock. 2:50 a.m. I just have to hold out. The knocking stops. A heavy silence settles over the restaurant, stretching so long that my shoulders start to relax. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's done. Then the doorknob rattles. A sharp, metallic clatter echoes through the kitchen. My stomach drops. Something wants out. I turn toward the supply closet, my breath shallow, my pulse hammering in my ears. The door shudders in its frame, as if something inside is pushing against it. I don't move. I don't breathe. Then, a voice. Low. Familiar. Let me out, Liam. My chest locks up. The voice is soft. Wrong. It curls around my name like something testing the weight of it. But I recognize it. I know that voice. My stomach turns to ice. It sounds like my little sister. The sister who died in a house fire when I was 12. I take a step back, shaking my head. No, that's not possible. The closet door shudders again. I see movement. A sliver of red light pulses through the gap beneath the door, like something glowing inside. My breath catches. I don't want to look. I shouldn't look, but my feet are already moving before I can stop them. I step closer. Closer. The air warps. The space around the door feels heavy, thick, like stepping into a room that's just been set on fire. My sister is dead. This isn't real. I reach out. Just a quick look, just a peek. I press my fingers against the edge of the door and ease it open just a fraction. A pair of glowing red eyes stare back at me. My breath rips from my lungs. I stumble back, heart slamming against my ribs. The eyes don't blink, they just watch. Silent, burning. Liam. My sister's voice again, small, weak. Then the door bursts open. I flinch, raising an arm like it'll protect me, but nothing. The closet is empty, dark, silent. No red eyes, no voice. Just shelves stacked with paper cups and sauce packets. A mop leaning against the wall, and a single, charred shoe sitting in the middle of the floor. A small shoe, familiar. My stomach twists. My limbs feel numb. I can't breathe. I don't pick it up. I don't go near it. I just back away, my hands shaking, and slam the closet door shut. Then I turn and run. I don't stop until I'm behind the counter again, gripping the edge so hard my knuckles ache. My entire body is trembling. My brain refuses to make sense of what just happened. I don't move for the next 10 minutes. I just stand there, waiting. Eventually, the knocking doesn't come back. I don't touch the closet again for the rest of the night. Every time I glance toward it, I half expect to see the door cracked open again, those red eyes staring at me from the dark. But it stays shut. I haven't cleaned anything, haven't restocked, haven't checked the fryer since whatever the hell happened earlier. I don't care. I just need to make it to morning. The drive-through bell dings. I flinch. For a second, I consider ignoring it. But if Mr. Hargrove checks the cameras and sees me slacking, I'm screwed. I exhale slowly, rub my hands over my face, and force myself to move. I step up to the register, pressing the button on my headset. "Welcome to Burger Haven. What can I get for you?" Silence. Just a faint crackle of static. Then, midnight special. My stomach drops. I don't recognize the voice. It's low, gravelly, like someone with a throat infection. But that doesn't matter. Rule 5. If a customer orders the midnight special, tell them it's unavailable. If they insist, lock yourself in the freezer until morning. I grip the counter tighter. "Sorry, we don't have that." Silence. Then the voice snaps. "You have to give it to me! It's mine!" I jerk the headset off, my ears ringing. The voice wasn't normal. It was wrong. Layered. Like multiple people speaking at once, all slightly out of sync. The drive-through bell dings again. A car is at the window. I don't want to look, but my body moves on autopilot, dragging me forward until I'm standing right at the glass. The headlights are too bright, too white, burning against the darkness like they don't belong in this world. The car itself is black, sleek, too clean for a place like this. The window is rolled down. And the driver, I freeze. The man looks normal at first. Pale, hollow-cheeked, dressed in an old suit, the fabric stiff like it hasn't been washed in decades. But his face is melting. His skin sags in thick, wet rivulets, sliding down his jaw and exposing bone. His eyes drip away like candle wax, sockets dark and empty. But somehow, I know he's still staring at me. His lips peel back. He tries to smile, but there's no skin left to hold it together. "Give it to me." I slam the window shut. The man's mouth stretches. His jaw unhinges, hanging too low, like a puppet with broken strings. The intercom crackles. The voice hisses through the speaker, distorted and wet. "We'll be back." Then the car is gone. I don't see it leave. 1 second it's there. The next, the lot is empty, like it was never there at all. I stagger back, heart hammering against my ribs. Then behind me, the overhead lights flicker. Rule 6. At 3 a.m., the lights will flicker. Stand perfectly still until they stop. Do not look at the shadows. I freeze. My breath catches in my throat, my entire body going rigid as the buzzing fluorescent bulbs stutter above me. The shadows in the corners stretch and contract like they're breathing. The whole restaurant feels wrong, like I'm not alone. A shiver runs down my spine. Every instinct screams at me to move, to run, to do something. But I don't. I can't. Then, something brushes against my leg. I nearly jump out of my skin. The sensation is cold. Not just cold, freezing. Clammy, bony fingers tighten around my ankle, squeezing just enough for me to feel the ridges of knuckles, the sharp press of fingernails. My stomach lurches. I want to look down. I want to rip my leg away and sprint out the door, rules be damned. But I don't. The lights flicker again, just for a split second. And in that split second, I see it. A small figure, crouched beneath the counter, staring up at me with wide, hollow eyes. The skin is stretched too tight over its skull, lips curled back in a permanent grin. Its hands are too long, fingers too thin. I can feel them wrapped around my leg. I clench my jaw so hard my teeth ache. My vision blurs at the edges. The lights flicker again, off. Total darkness. A voice whispers, "You're not supposed to look." My chest locks. The grip on my ankle disappears. The lights flicker back on. I suck in a sharp breath, my heart slamming against my ribs. My body shakes as I finally dare to move, backing away from the counter. The figure is gone. But something else is wrong. The floor beneath me is wet. Dark red pools around my shoes, smeared in strange, erratic patterns. Blood. And leading away from me, a trail of bloody footprints. My pulse pounds in my ears. I don't want to follow them. I don't even want to be here anymore. But something in me has to know. The footprints lead past the register, through the cramped kitchen, stopping at the freezer. The door is slightly ajar. A blast of cold air seeps into the room, curling around my skin like icy fingers. I don't want to look, but I do. I pull the freezer door open. The shelves are nearly empty. Just a few bags of frozen fries, some old burger patties sealed in plastic, except for one. One single patty, lying alone on the metal shelf. It's not like the others. It's shaped like a face. My face. Every detail is there, my nose, my mouth, my eyes, frozen solid in the raw, icy meat. Then, the eyes snap open. A thick, wet crack splits across its frozen lips, and it moves. It whispers, voice faint but unmistakable. "You're next." The freezer door slams shut, and I scream. I don't go back to the freezer. Not after what I saw. I spend the rest of my shift gripping the counter, staring at the clock, counting the minutes until sunrise. Every sound makes my skin crawl, the hum of the fryers, the distant rustle of paper napkins, the occasional flicker of the overhead lights. By the time my shift ends, I'm halfway convinced I hallucinated everything. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe my brain is playing tricks on me. But then I see it. The bloody footprints? Gone. The freezer door? Wide open, nothing inside. And yet as I clock out, I swear I hear a voice, faint, distant, whispering from the vents. "See you tonight, Liam." I don't sleep. I can't. Instead, I start digging. Burger Haven has been around for decades, but the records are weird, too clean. No health violations, no reports of employee injuries, nothing about past owners, like the place has always been here. But the land? That's a different story. I finally find something buried in old newspaper archives. The original building wasn't a restaurant. It was an orphanage. St. Mark's Home for Children, built in the early 1900s. A place for kids nobody wanted. And in 1958, it burned to the ground. No survivors. The cause? Unknown. But the reports mention something else. Something that makes my stomach turn. The fire started in the kitchen. And the last thing the neighbors reported before the flames consumed the building. Laughter. I show up to my next shift early. Mr. Hargrove is already there, sitting at the manager's desk, shuffling through receipts with his usual tired expression. I hesitate before stepping into his office. "Mr. Hargrove?" He doesn't look up. I grip the doorframe. My mouth is dry. "How long have you worked here?" He finally raises his head. His hollow eyes settle on me, studying. "Long enough," he says. "Long enough for what?" A slow, humorless smile creeps across his face. For the rules to make sense. His hands are resting on the desk. For the first time, I really look at them. The scars. Not just burns. Old, deep blisters. Skin melted together like candle wax. Like he's been burned over and over again. I swallow hard. My voice shakes. "This place, it's built on the old orphanage, isn't it?" Something flickers across his face. Amusement. "You finally figured it out, huh?" My stomach sinks. "You knew," I whisper. "You knew about the kids, about the fire, the rules. They're to keep them from hurting us, aren't they?" Mr. Hargrove chuckles. It's a dry, empty sound. "They don't want to hurt you, Liam." He leans forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They want to play." My breath catches. "You've seen them now," he continues. "Heard them, felt them." His smile fades. "They like you." I shake my head. "I don't. You've followed the rules." The room feels smaller, the air thicker. My pulse pounds in my ears. And what happens if I don't? For the first time, Mr. Hargrove looks sad. "You become part of the family." His voice is so quiet, I barely hear it. I stare at him. My brain refuses to process what he's saying. The midnight special. The customers who scream for it. The employees who disappear. I feel sick. "How long have you been here?" I whisper. He exhales slowly, like he's been holding his breath for decades. "I was one of them." He says finally. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "The orphanage," I murmur. He nods. "I didn't die in the fire, not completely. They made me something else. They made me watch over this place, keep the cycle going." I step back. I need to leave. I need to get out. "Liam," his voice stops me. I meet his eyes. "You can't quit," he says. And in that moment I know, he isn't warning me. He's telling the truth. Because the kids don't just want food, they want playmates. And they've already chosen me. I wasn't alone the next night. Her name was Jenna, early 20s, like me, with tired eyes and the kind of posture that said she'd rather be anywhere else. She mentioned she just started, picked up the shift for some extra cash, same as me. Said she used to work mornings at another fast food joint, but the pay was crap, and this place gave a small bonus for nights. She didn't seem too thrilled about it, but I couldn't blame her. Mr. Hargrove barely acknowledged her. Just gave her the same crumpled list of rules and walked off without explaining a damn thing. I figured it was better that way. Easier to swallow the rules than to ask questions that wouldn't have good answers. We worked in silence for most of the night. She handled the register. I covered the grill. It was almost normal until the drive-through intercom crackled at 2:45 a.m. "Midnight special," a voice rasped. I froze. Jenna, not knowing any better, leaned toward the mic. "Sorry, what?" I grabbed her wrist. "Tell them it's unavailable." She frowned but did as I said. Yeah, we don't have that." The voice on the other end didn't take it well. The speaker buzzed with a deep, wet static, like something breathing too close to the mic. "You have to give it to me," it said. "It's mine." Jenna backed away from the register. "What the hell?" "Shut the window," I said. She did. Just as the headlights outside dimmed and the silhouette of a man in the car shifted, his face pulling away like melting wax. The intercom snapped off, but his voice lingered, distorted, layered with others. "We'll be back." Jenna turned to me, her face pale. "What was that?" I didn't have an answer. By 3:30 a.m., she was shaking. "I'm not cut out for this, man." I didn't blame her. "Just follow the rules. That's all we can do." But that was before she made a mistake. It happened just before closing. She was taking a last-minute inventory in the freezer when the intercom buzzed again. A new voice this time. A child's voice. "Midnight special, please." I rushed to the register, already reaching for the switch to shut it off, but I was too late. Jenna had answered. Sure," she said absent-mindedly, "coming right up." The words left her lips, and the air around us changed. Heavy, thick, like a storm rolling in. I turned to her, heart pounding. "No, lock yourself in the freezer." She blinked. "What? Now?" She hesitated but ran. I followed, pushing the heavy door shut behind her just as the lights flickered. A scream tore through the kitchen. I grabbed the handle and yanked. The door wouldn't budge. "Jenna," I banged against it. "Open up." Her screams twisted into something else, something wrong. Laughter, small, distant, echoing. The same laughter I'd heard before. I shoved my shoulder against the door until it finally gave. The air inside was ice cold, my breath visible as I stumbled forward. Jenna stood in the middle of the freezer. Her face, God, her face was frozen solid, ice creeping up her neck like veins. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, her lips twisted in a silent scream. Around her on the freezer walls were handprints, small, dozens of them. The laughter faded. I backed away. "No, no, no, no." The freezer door slammed behind me. The lights went out, and in the dark, the voices whispered, "You're ours now." The cold was the first thing I noticed. Not just the lingering chill from the freezer, something deeper, something that had settled into my bones. My limbs felt heavy, stiff, like I'd been lying there for hours. I forced myself upright, blinking against the harsh light spilling in from the open door. I was alone. Jenna was gone. The freezer was empty, except for the handprints. I stumbled out into the kitchen. The fryers were off, the grills cold. The entire restaurant was eerily still, as if the night had never happened. Through the front windows, I saw the first light of dawn creeping over the horizon. Somehow, I'd made it. I didn't wait around to question it. I grabbed my bag, threw my apron on the counter, and bolted for the door. Outside, the air was crisp, the highway quiet. I inhaled, trying to steady myself. The memories of the night felt like a fever dream. Impossible, unreal. But the ice still clung to my skin. The voices still echoed in my ears. Then I felt something in my pocket, the rules. I pulled out the crumpled paper, my hands trembling. The same grease-stained list, the same shaky handwriting. But at the bottom, where there had been 6 rules before, there was now a 7th. Rule 7, you are one of us now. My breath hitched. I turned, staring back at the restaurant. The windows were dark. The neon sign flickered. And for just a second, I saw them. Small, shadowy figures pressed against the glass. Watching me, I ran. I left town that same day. Packed a bag, drained my bank account, and drove until the gaslight came on. Found a cheap apartment in a city where no one knew my name. Got a new job, day shifts only. No more fast food, no more empty highways. I told myself I was safe. Then the whispers started. At first, I thought it was the pipes. Old building, thin walls. But then I started hearing my name. Soft, distant. A giggle in the dark when I turned off the lights. One night I opened my fridge to grab a drink and nearly dropped the bottle. There, sitting on the top shelf, was a toy. A charred, melted doll. Its eyes followed me. The next morning I found greasy fingerprints on my bedroom door. Small. Dozens of them. The whispers grew louder. By the end of the week, I wasn't sleeping. Every night, I felt them, standing in the corners, just out of reach, just out of sight. Then, one night, I woke up gasping, heart pounding. The air was thick, suffocating, and I wasn't alone. They were there. Small figures barely visible in the darkness, their hollow eyes locked onto me. I tried to move, to run, but my body wouldn't listen. The door wouldn't open. The shadows crept closer, filling the room, swallowing the light. The last thing I heard was the children's laughter, and then, darkness. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more creepy stories. Stay safe, and see you in the next nightmare.